People often think that happiness is a given when you have everything: a successful career, a perfect partner, and a fulfilling life. I used to believe that too. But it turns out that happiness is not something that lasts forever. It can come crashing down in the blink of an eye. This is my story about how my seemingly ideal life turned into a nightmare that I never expected. My name is Evelyn Carter. I am an artist living in a luxury apartment with the man I thought was the man of my life, Daniel Carter. Daniel is a successful lawyer, smart, elegant, and always knows how to make me feel loved. We have been married for 7 years, and to me, this marriage is like a perfect painting that I have painstakingly painted. My career is also at its peak. My paintings were exhibited in prestigious galleries. My customers ordered more and more paintings, and my name gradually became valuable. I spent hours in my studio, immersed in colors, lines, and emotions, and every evening I returned to Daniel, who always held me tightly, as if this world only had the two of us. Everything was perfect. At least I thought so. But life is not as simple as a painting painted according to your wishes. Sometimes small cracks appear without you noticing until they gradually spread, destroying a masterpiece. And the first crack in my marriage started from small changes in Daniel. He no longer hugged me warmly when I returned home. The good morning messages gradually became less frequent. His eyes looking at me were no longer full of love like before, but instead were inexplicably distant. Late-night meetings, unannounced absences, flimsy explanations. At first, I told myself he was just busy, but my gut told me something was wrong. I tried to ignore the bad feelings, convincing myself that I was imagining things. But then, one day, I discovered something that made my heart stop. In Daniel's vest pocket, I found a pack of mints, something he had never used before. It sounded absurd, but I knew my husband. Daniel did not have the habit of eating mints unless he was trying to hide something. My gut told me that this was just the beginning. I had no idea what I was about to face, but part of me was ready to step into the storm. I tried to push away my doubts, telling myself that I was being overly suspicious. But as time went on, the signs became more obvious. Daniel came home later than usual. His calls became more frequent, and worse, he started keeping his phone with him all the time. One rainy afternoon, while walking around the neighborhood looking for drawing inspiration, I decided to stop by a small coffee shop that Daniel and I used to love. The aroma of coffee and the soft jazz music made me feel more comfortable. I chose a seat near the window, ordered a cappuccino, and intended to spend some time relaxing. But then, when I happened to look towards the door, my heart suddenly sank. Daniel entered the shop, but he was not alone. Beside him was a beautiful young woman with long brown hair and bright eyes. The two of them looked extremely intimate, too intimate for a normal relationship. Daniel pulled out her chair for her, smiling at her in a way I thought was only meant for me. They talked, laughed, and I noticed that he looked at her the same way he looked at me all those years ago. I couldn't take my eyes off the scene before me. Daniel's hand brushed against hers as he handed her the coffee. It was a small gesture, but it was enough to make my heart ache. I wanted to believe that this was just a normal meeting, but every sense in me was screaming that something was wrong. I sat there, trying to stay calm, but my mind was racing with questions. Who was that girl? How long had Daniel been lying to me? Was I just misunderstanding everything? I wanted to rush to face him right away, but I couldn't. I didn't want to make a scene in the middle of a crowded cafe. Instead, I took out my phone and secretly took a picture. If this was just a misunderstanding, I would laugh at myself later. But if not, I needed proof of what I had just witnessed. I left the coffee shop without letting Daniel see me. My heart was heavy as I walked through the light rain. The feeling of betrayal was something more painful than sadness. It was like someone had taken a piece of my soul away, leaving a void that I didn't know how to fill. When I got home, I sat silently on the sofa, staring at the photo on my phone. Daniel still hadn't come home. Should I confront him as soon as he walked in the door? Or should I wait, find out more to find out the truth? 1,000 thoughts were swirling in my head, but one thing was certain. The marriage I had believed to be perfect was starting to crumble. And this could just be the beginning of an even more brutal truth that I wasn't ready to face. Daniel came home late that night, as I had predicted. I sat on the sofa, in the dark, just listening to the sound of the key turning in the lock. When the door opened, the light from the hallway spilled into the room, reflecting his tired face. "You're not asleep yet?" Daniel asked, his voice a little surprised and confused. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice as calm as possible. "Where have you been?" Daniel blinked, a little hesitant, but quickly regained his composure. "I had a meeting with a partner. It lasted longer than expected." I watched his every expression. If I hadn't witnessed the scene at the cafe, I might have believed it. But now, all I saw was a man lying smoothly. "Partner?" I emphasized, my eyes never leaving him. Daniel nodded, put the briefcase on the table, and went into the kitchen, pouring himself a glass of water. "Yeah, I told you." I felt my heart beat faster as I pulled out my phone, opening the photo I'd taken earlier in the day. I placed the phone on the table, turning the screen to face him. "So this is the meeting you were talking about?" Daniel paused, his eyes moving from the phone to my face. For a moment, I saw the panic in his eyes before he quickly covered it with a forced smile. "Emma," he sighed, setting down his glass, "you were following me? It seems like I'm the one who needs explaining, not you." I crossed my arms over my chest, feeling my palms go cold. Daniel chuckled, a laugh that I had once thought charming, but now just made me feel alienated. "She's just a colleague. We had a project together, and we went for coffee to discuss work." "Really?" I smirked. "Then why have I never heard you mention her? And if it was work, why did you have to hold her hand?" Daniel opened his mouth to say something, but then stopped. The atmosphere in the room suddenly became tense, so heavy that I found it hard to breathe. "I don't want to hurt you," he finally said, his voice so low I almost couldn't hear it. I felt a chill run down my spine. "What are you admitting to, Daniel?" He closed his eyes, as if he were trying to muster up the courage to face me. "She and I had a relationship, but it wasn't what you think. It wasn't cheating?" I interrupted, my voice bitter. "So what do you call going out with another woman while you're still married?" Daniel didn't answer right away. He just looked at me, his eyes conflicted, as if he didn't know what he was doing. A surge of anger shot through me. I stood up, my body shaking with rage. "You betrayed me, Daniel, and you have the nerve to stand here and defend yourself." "I didn't mean to hurt you," he said louder, his voice laced with desperation. "It was an accident. I never planned to betray you." I chuckled. So you fell into her arms by accident. Daniel clenched his hands into fists. I could see the regret in his eyes, but it didn't matter anymore, because no matter how much he regretted it, he had done the unforgivable. "Emma, I love you," he whispered, stepping closer to me. I took a step back, as if touching him would hurt me more. "If I really loved you, I wouldn't have done this." The air in the room was thick. I felt like I was standing on a cliff, just one step away from falling off the cliff. Daniel opened his mouth to say something, but I held up my hand. "Don't say anything," I interrupted. "You had the chance to do the right thing, but you chose this path." The room fell silent. I turned and walked toward the bedroom, slamming the door behind me, leaving Daniel standing there, a lonely figure in the dark room. I had thought our marriage was a beautiful story, but now it was slowly turning into a nightmare from which I had no idea how to wake up. After that night, I never looked at Daniel the same again. An invisible barrier had been erected between us, a painful silence that enveloped us both. Every morning, he left the house earlier, and every night he came back later. The large apartment suddenly became so cold that I felt like I was living in an empty space. I stopped crying. The anger subsided, replaced by a feeling of exhaustion. I began to think about my future without him. The idea of divorce crept into my mind, but just thinking about it made me feel pain. How could I easily give up the years of attachment, the memories that I had cherished? Then, one day, a message suddenly appeared on my phone. "Are you Emma? I need to talk to you about Daniel." My heart pounded when I saw the unfamiliar number. I hesitated for a moment before deciding to text back. "Who are you?" A moment later, a second message arrived. "Can we meet? It's important." I thought for a few seconds, then typed a short sentence. "Where?" We arranged to meet at a small coffee shop in the suburbs. When I walked in, I saw a young woman sitting in the corner of the room, her hands clutching a cup of coffee, her face full of tension. She saw me, took a deep breath, and stood up. "Hi, I'm Lily," she said, her voice trembling. I pulled up a chair and sat down, my eyes never leaving her. "So, what do you want to tell me about Daniel?" Lily was silent for a moment, as if trying to organize her thoughts. Then she put her phone on the table and opened a series of messages. I glanced at the screen and felt my stomach tighten. They were messages between Daniel and her. "I promised to leave her for you. Just give me some time. I can't let her doubt. We'll have a future together." Everything in front of me fell apart. I had thought that Daniel's relationship with that woman was just a temporary mistake, but now I knew that he had been deceiving me for a longer time than I thought. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice calm. "Why are you telling me this?" Lily bowed her head, her voice filled with regret. "I didn't know he was married when we started. When I found out, he told me that your marriage was about to end, that you didn't love him anymore. But I can't continue living this lie. I think you deserve to know the truth." I looked at the young woman in front of me, feeling a surge of anger welling up in my heart, but not towards her. It was towards Daniel. Not only did he betray me, he also cheated on this girl. I stood up, feeling my body shaking with anger. "Thank you for telling me," Lily nodded, her eyes filled with sadness. I turned and walked out of the cafe, my heart now completely clear. I knew what I had to do. There was no more hesitation. This was the moment I realized this marriage was truly over. I left the cafe with shaking legs, my heart heavy with the truth I had just discovered. Everything I had believed about this marriage, about the man I had loved was now a lie that had lasted for too long. In the days that followed, I couldn't sleep well. I stared at the ceiling, wondering how things had come to this. How stupid had I been to not notice the signs, the late nights, the texts he hastily hid, the growing distance between us. All of these were warnings that I had ignored because I didn't want to believe that the man I loved could betray me so cruelly. But now the truth was right in front of me, and I couldn't continue to pretend like nothing had happened. I decided to confront Daniel. That day, I waited for him to come home. When the door opened, he looked at me warily, as if he sensed something was wrong. I stood in the middle of the living room, holding my phone, Lily's message still on the screen. "We need to talk," I said, my voice strangely calm. Daniel walked in, closing the door behind him, but he didn't come near me. "About what?" he asked, feigning ignorance. I held up the phone, letting him see the messages Lily had sent me. "She told me everything," I said. "Do you have anything else to say?" Daniel's face paled for a moment, but he quickly regained his composure. "Emma, can you explain?" "Explain what?" I interrupted, my voice starting to shake with anger. "How long have you been lying to me, Daniel?" "A year? 2 years? How long?" He sighed, rubbing his forehead as if trying to come up with a reasonable excuse. "It's not as simple as you think. I still love you, but I love her too." I laughed, but it wasn't a laugh of joy, but of bitterness. "You love me? If you love me, why did you betray me? If you love me, why did you lie to me over and over again?" Daniel said nothing, just stood there, helpless. I looked at him, the man I thought would be my lifelong companion, and I realized the harsh truth. There was nothing left to save. "You ruined everything," I said, my voice hoarse. "You not only betrayed me, but you lied to that girl too. You hurt us both." Daniel stepped closer, trying to take my hand, but I pulled back. "I'm sorry, Emma. I'm really sorry." I looked him straight in the eye, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had no feelings for this man anymore. "Sorry doesn't change anything," I said. "This marriage is over." Daniel opened his mouth to say something, but then he stopped. He probably knew that there was nothing left to save. I turned and walked back to the bedroom, closing the door behind me. Tears welled up, but this time they weren't tears of pain, but tears of relief. The battle had come to a head, and now there was only one way for me to move forward: leave the past behind and start over. After a tense confrontation with Daniel, I packed my things and left the apartment we used to share. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay in this place for another minute. I rented a small apartment in the suburbs, far from the painful memories, far from what had made me think I was living a beautiful love story. The first days of living alone were difficult. I was lost. I didn't know what my future would hold. But no matter what, I knew I couldn't go back. One evening, while I was sorting through old papers, I happened to find a small envelope stuck among Daniel's financial documents. My heart was pounding. I didn't know why I had a bad feeling about it, but I opened it anyway. Inside was a stack of bank statements, but what shocked me the most was that the account name wasn't Daniel's. It was mine. I frowned, flipping through the pages. The amount of money in this account was not small, and more importantly, it had been accumulated over many years. I had no idea about it at all. Someone had been depositing money into this account regularly for many years, and in the transaction information section, I saw a familiar name, my father. My hands trembled as I realized the truth. My father, who had passed away a few years ago, had left me a large sum of money, but I had never known about it. Why? I hurriedly searched for more documents. An old letter fell out of the pile of papers. It was a letter from my father, written before he passed away. My dear daughter, I know that one day you may need this money. I don't know what you will use it for, but I want you to know that there is always a way for you to move forward, no matter how difficult life is. Don't let anyone make you lose your worth. Live the life you deserve. I felt tears welling up in my eyes, but this time not from sadness, but from emotion. My father had always protected me silently, even when he was no longer in this world. But what was more frightening was, why did Daniel have these documents? Did he know about this money? A cold thought ran down my spine. If Daniel knew about this account, did it mean our entire marriage was just an arrangement? Had he taken advantage of me from the beginning? I clutched the letter in my hand. Anger and pain surged through me. Not only was I emotionally betrayed, but I was also betrayed in terms of trust and family assets. I knew I couldn't sit still any longer. I had to find out the truth. And this time, I wouldn't let myself be deceived again. I was no longer the weak girl of yesterday. After days of being immersed in pain, I realized that I could no longer be held back by the past. I decided to confront Daniel, but this time, not to find answers, but to end it all. Our last meeting took place at a small coffee shop. When I put the documents on the table, Daniel was startled. I looked straight into his eyes and asked, "When did you know about this account?" Daniel's silence said it all. He did not deny it. Perhaps because he understood that this time I was in control. I was no longer the woman who always tried to please him, no longer the naive one who believed in sweet lies. I stood up, took the documents with me, and said the last sentence. "You can deceive my feelings, but you will not be able to take away my self-esteem and my life." Leaving the coffee shop, I felt lighter than ever. It wasn't a glorious victory, but it was the moment I truly got myself back. A few months later, I used the money my father left me to start a new life. I enrolled in courses, opened a small business, and most importantly, I learned to love myself. I no longer blame fate, no longer regret what I lost. I understand that sometimes loss is necessary for us to find our true value. My story is not about revenge, nor is it about seeking justice. It is the journey of a woman who was once broken, but learned to stand up from the brokenness. And the biggest lesson I realized, no one can decide your value except you.